Hi there, Chris here. So you may not already know this, but recently AccuQuilt and June Tailor merged together and are now the same company. So as an AccuQuilt ambassador, I'm now also a June Tailor ambassador, which means I get to try out some June Tailor products now. Today we're going to be making the Sophie tote bag, which is a Quilt As You Go project. What's really cool about the June Tailor Quilt As You Go is this pre-printed batting. It has lines pre-printed on it for you to line up your fabric before you sew your 1/4-inch seam. Once you've sewn all of your pieces in number order, there's no additional quilting you need to do. Everything's already together, and then you can move on to the next step of your project. And every June Tailor project also comes with written instructions to help guide you through it and give you all of your cutting instructions. Most of their projects utilize 2.5-inch strips, so you can use the AccuQuilt strip cutters, or you can use the June Tailor shape cut ruler, which I'll show you today. Let's get started. So I went through my scrap stash and picked out a bunch of 2.5-inch strips for the main part of the tote. So that would be the base part here. But then for the upper part, as well as the lining, I picked this for some yardage. So for the lining, I need 24 inches by 35 inches. And since this is a yard of fabric, this direction is going to be my 35 inches. So I'm going to unfold it and then refold it the other direction. So this is my selvage edge right here. I'm going to fold it up again. And from here, I'll need to measure 24 inches. Now, this does not have to be an exact measurement. This is going to just be the backing that we're going to attach at the very beginning. And then once all of the pieces are sewn on, we will trim it down. All right, there's my backing. And then from that same fabric, I'm also going to cut the 2 top strips, which you can see along the top of the bag here. And I'll cut these down to length. So the shape cut has these slots in it every 1/2 inch. So if you line up this 0 line so that it is perfectly on the fold of your fabric, then we'll cut right here as our starting line. 1/2 inch, 1 inch, 1.5 inches. So right here will be 1.5 inches. So without having to move the ruler, you've cut your perfect 1.5 inches. And now if your fabric, this is folded in half, selvage to selvage, is wider than your ruler, what you'll want to do is fold it again. And the important thing here is that the 2 fold lines are parallel to each other. So it doesn't matter if it's parallel to the selvage in case it got off. What's super important is that the folds are perfectly parallel. So I have fold here and a fold here, and they are parallel to each other. I need this to be a 2-inch strip. So I'm going to line up that bottom line, and I'll move over just a little bit. I'm starting at 2.5 inches. Just make sure that top, everything's parallel. Then we'll put the blade right into the slot and cut. Now I need this to be 2 inches. So since I started at the 0, I can just go over to the 2, put that down in the slot, and cut. So there's 1 2-inch strip, and I need 2 of those. I only have 1 piece of that fabric, so I'm going to use this for the other strip. What's really nice about this type of ruler is if you're needing to cut multiple strips out of yardage, you can just lay it down, cut at the 0, and then say like the 2.5, the 5, 7.5, 10, and that would give you 4 2.5-inch strips without having to move the ruler. So we're going to line this up. Make sure everything's parallel. Drop in our blade and a slice. And we'll go to the 2-inch mark and do the same. All right, all of the fabric is cut out. So now we're going to open up the batting. So everything is pre-printed, and it wants you to trim the batting about 1/2 of an inch away from the lines. It does not have to be exact. It's just to make it a little more manageable. I'll just take the rotary cutter and a ruler and start going around. This part right here is for the boxed corners along the bottom of the bag, and I'm just going to go straight across. I'm not going to worry about cutting that out at this point. So that is the bag. And now for the straps, it wants you to cut out directly on the lines. Everything's cut, so let's start assembling. We are going to start by putting our backing fabric on the non-printed side of the batting. Just kind of smooth that out, and I'll be using the June Tailor basting spray to temporarily fix it on there. I'm putting down this other mat just to help with some of the overspray. And now we'll take our backing fabric and lay it down right side up. Just smooth it out as you go. And now we can head over to the sewing machine. Now, before you start attaching all of your strips, it's really important to go and sew around on that outermost line all the way around your project. That's going to be really important for when we go to trim it up later. All right, so for the quilt by number, we're going to start with piece number 1 and piece number 2. So for piece number 1, you'll notice it is slightly wider than all of the others. These lines are where you're going to line up the edge of your fabric. So piece 1, we're going to put right side up, just like that. And then piece 2, we'll go right side down, right on top of it, because when we sew and press it open, it's going to cover that piece 2. So we're going to lay that down, and then sew a standard 1/4 inch from that edge. And I will do a small back stitch right at the beginning of the seam. Now we need to press this open. And this is a polycotton blend, so you don't want to hit this with a hot iron. If you have a mini iron, you could probably get it in there, or you can use a seam roller or a magic seam wand to get that nice and flat. You just drag it along and it will flatten out your seam. All right, and now we move on to piece 3. Piece 4. And now that we've attached all the strips to the front of the project, it is time to flip it around and sew from the back. Now we are going to follow that same stitching line that we did at step 1 to secure all of the edges of the project. Before you flip it over, you can also use a glue stick or some more of that basting spray to keep the larger pieces from kind of flapping around and not laying exactly where you need them to be. Now that we have all of our fabrics attached, we need to trim off all of the excess. So the initial stitching we did, that was going to be our guideline for trimming it off. You want to trim just on the outside of that stitching line, less than 1/8 of an inch. So this is what our tote will look like now. We're going to fold it right sides together, and we're going to sew a 1/2 inch seam down both of these edges. Not in the little box here, but just along that edge. Now with these instructions, these edges are going to be left raw, so I'm going to take a second and serge them just to help prevent fraying. You can also put on a binding or a zigzag or cut it with pinking shears if you like. Now that the sides have been sewn, we need to sew our boxed corners. So what we will do is open this up. So these 2 divots will end up being the sides of the seam. And I will open up this seam just to help with the bulk, and then sew 1/2 inch straight across there, and do the same on the other side. Now we can turn this right side out. The next step is to put a binding around the top edge. So I have that cut out. And what I'm going to do is sew this as one continuous tube so that it perfectly fits. And then you'll attach it the same way you would attach binding to a quilt. So we're going to fold it in half. I will press it and then attach it to the front side of the bag, flip it around to the inside, and then stitch it down. So this is the full circumference of the bag. And then I need to add 2.5 inches so that I can do a diagonal seam. And I'll just take this over to the machine, sew that diagonal.
I went ahead and clipped all of the binding in place. And here I am attaching it, but I am attaching it with the binding on the underside, just because it was easier to sew around the circumference of the bag that way. And now that the binding's all attached, I flipped it around to the inside of the bag, and I'm going to top stitch from the outside of the bag, just along that seam so that it catches the backside of the binding.
And now to make the straps. So we're going to start with the strap pieces that are 2.5 inches wide. And we are going to add our piece of batting into the center. They recommend using a glue stick or the basting spray. So I real quick am just going to lightly spray the fabric. Place this right in the center. It's not going to go all the way to the edges. That's fine. We'll press that down. Then we're going to fold the raw edges into the center. So I'm going to spray the batting. It's another shot of adhesive. One. Next, we'll repeat those steps with the 2-inch strips and the included webbing. Now we're going to take our wider strap and pair it with one of the skinnier straps of webbing and top stitch this in place. I'll throw in a couple clips just to help hold everything in place. Now that our straps are made, we need to attach them. So we're going to measure in 5 inches from the edge. Just going to make a little mark. This is a heat erasable pen. You're going to take your strap with the webbing side down and line up the edge of the strap with the bottom of the binding. And then you can feel in here where the webbing and the batting stop. It's about right there. So that's what, like an inch, maybe an inch and a quarter down. And you're going to stitch right there. So to keep it consistent, I am going to make some markings. Looks like it is an inch and a quarter. And we're just going to stitch straight across to attach them. While I'm here, I'll do the other side as well. So again, webbing side facing the bag. Then line this up with the bottom of the binding. Right, those are attached on, so now we're going to flip them up, and we'll sew a straight line right across the bottom of the binding. There we go. All finished. I'll leave a link for the Sophie Bag Quilt As You Go kit in the description, and while you're there on the AccuQuilt website, you can check out all of the other Quilt As You Go projects they have. There's some really cool ones. Thanks for watching. See you next time.